going on, everybody? It is new bike day. We are out here in the garage. It's about 20 degrees, but we're gonna go give this thing a ride today. See what it's all about. So it's the middle of winter. We're here in the Midwest. We have got a leftover. This is a 2024 Scor 2030 NX. So it's full carbon, SRAM NX drivetrain, RockShox Pike fork. So on paper, it looks like a pretty sweet deal. Could not pass it up. It's like a $5,000 MSRP, marked down to $2,000 plus shipping, plus tax. So like $2,300 out the door. I don't know. We're gonna see. We're gonna give this thing a go. I'm out here. I've had it inside. We're gonna let it get adjusted to the temperatures out here because it's much colder than it is in my house. Let everything come to temp. Get everything readjusted. So for the format of the video, I'll show some riding from today. I'll start with the conditions, move into the fit of the bike, talk about the climbing performance, the descending performance, overall handling, as well as the suspension, and wrap up with just some general comments and overall first impressions. On the fit of the bike, I come in right at 6'1", and I opted to go with the medium large size. And so this is actually sizing down a little bit from the recommended. If you look at the Scor 2030 sizing chart, I'm pretty much right in the middle of the large size range. Comparing the geometry and the sizing of the Scor 2030 to my previous bike, which was a Specialized Stump Jumper S4, with the exception of a 1 degree slacker head tube angle, it was pretty much right on par with the S4 sizing to go with a medium large on the Scor. So for that reason, I sized down. I'm really not doing a lot of downhill. I like a bike that's snappy. I like a bike that handles quick and is easy to move around the trail. And I felt like the reach especially matched up from the medium large on the Scor to the S4 size and the Specialized. And so I opted to go with that, and overall I was pretty happy with it. I felt like I wasn't crunched up on the bike. I wasn't stretched out. I had no problems getting the seat where I needed it. And overall, it was a pretty comfortable bike. And if you put me in a blindfold, I don't know that I would tell a huge difference between the geometry in those two bikes. All right, so moving uphill into the climbing performance of the Scor 2030, I feel like overall this is a bike that does climb well. I really didn't have much pedal bob to speak of, and I feel like the bike is an efficient pedaler. When you put some power to the pedal, I really felt like the bike did a good job at moving me uphill. And I didn't feel like I was really laboring to go up hills. And that's something that makes sense. It's a shorter travel, especially in the rear. It's a carbon frame. It's relatively lightweight. There's nothing about this bike that says that it should not be a good climber. So, and I do feel like the seating position is good for climbing. If you get in a spot where you need to stand, obviously you can really put some power down that way. But staying in a seated position while making a climb, I feel like you're in an aggressive enough position. You can put some power into the pedals. You're back far enough that you've got good traction, but you're not so far back that the front end wants to come up as you're going up a steep or as you're putting some power into it. So overall, pretty happy with the climbing performance so far. All right, so now going downhill into the descending performance. I really can't comment as far as true downhill. I did not ride the bike at a downhill park. I didn't ride it, down a big descent, but I did ride it down some of our small descents that we have around here. And while pretty small, the bike did feel good. If say you come around a tree, you point the thing downhill, get your weight back a little bit, and it does feel good. It feels stable. It feels like it wants to go fast. And I am looking forward to more downhill on this bike. Getting into the handling of the 2030, I feel like this is maybe the strongest category from my initial ride. The handling felt really snappy, felt nice, felt predictable, and through some of the really tight stuff especially, it felt like it should for the category of bike that it is. Cutting between the trees, some small berms, some off-camber turns, some downhill, some uphill, just working through the single track that we've got here in the Midwest. There was nothing this bike did that I didn't like. On paper, I mentioned it's very similar to my Stump Jumper, which I felt like was a really good. It's a trail bike. It's kind of a neutral. I really enjoyed that bike, and I was kind of nervous to go away from it. But going into the Scor 2030, With a little bit slacker head tube angle, I was concerned whether that would slow down the steering too much to be good for some of the really tight stuff we've got here. Um, but I've got to say, I didn't feel like the 1 degree slacker head tube angle had a huge impact on the handling performance in terms of smoothly working through the really tight stuff. I felt like it kept all the predictableness. It was fast enough, obviously not twitchy at all at 64.5 degrees. But overall, like just a smooth, snappy. Probably the short rear chainstays help with that. But really nice handling bike overall. I'm happy with it so far. And getting into the suspension performance for the Scor 2030, my opinion is, especially in the Midwest, or if you're in general riding more moderate trails without a ton of like big drops, big chunky rocks, things like that. If you're riding, more smooth stuff, you've got some smaller rocks, some tree roots, some little descents and things. This is really plenty of suspension travel. 140 up front, 120 in the rear. You've got what you need there, but you're not paying that tax and losing all the pedaling efficiency. It's still a playful bike. Um, if you get into some bigger stuff, you may need to be a bit selective about your line choice. But honestly, I think that's kind of what makes a bike like this fun, is that you can't just ride over everything and not even know it's there. You've kind of got to be a little selective, a little playful, put some thought and creativity into your riding when the trail gets tougher. And I think that's a spot where it's a lot of fun. At least for how I had this bike set up for today, normal air pressures that I would run in my tires, and my fork, and my shock from my stump jumper, I transferred all over to this for a starting point, with pretty middle of the road compression setting and rebound settings on the fork and the shock. And I felt like it was firm, it had good hold up. I feel like it wasn't quite as plush right on the top of the stroke as my stump jumper is, um, which kind of makes sense in the rear, especially losing a little bit of overall travel. But I felt like the bike was still plush enough. It still soaked things up, but maybe lost a little bit right on the very top of the stroke. Overall, like still a comfortable ride, like I wasn't getting beat up at all. Um, and some of that could be the bike, breaking in as well, and the cold temperatures. But overall, I would sum it up as a little firmer, and yep. All right. So in summary, as I was thinking about it, for the Scor 2030, if I had to pick 2 words to describe this bike so far, the first I would give it is efficient. I think between the weight, the seating position, just kind of general geometry of the bike, I feel like it is a pretty efficient bike for what you get. It felt like it pedaled well. It felt like it went uphill. It felt like it went downhill. And did everything that it needed to without too much, no complaining really. The second word that I would use to describe this bike would be playful. I feel like coming through, especially a lot of the tighter corners and some of the places where you could, jump a tree root and drop down a little bit, um, the bike was more than happy to do that, and it didn't take a lot of input to get the bike to do those things. So overall, stay tuned. We'll put some more miles on it. We'll see how it does in some other trails. But from day one, that's the first impression.